So the other day I watched a video on hookup culture, and I have to say, I didn't really like it all that much. Not because the lady came to conclusions that I don't have. Ironically, she came to the same exact conclusions I came to. I just don't really like how she decided to toe the line rather than kind of be upfront, despite the fact that she literally spent the entire time painting the case that hookup culture probably isn't really healthy. Which is the title of her video. She asks the question, the title is Hookup Culture Healthy, and spends the first 10 minutes kind of really describing more or less the state of affairs that we find ourselves in 2K19, thus 2K20 now. Basically, people are more casual about their sexual experiences and their sexual desires, and people are now trying to have more sex than most people are focusing on trying to obtain relationships. And most people kind of slip and fall into relationships more so based on them just constantly having sex with someone rather than it being an objective or goal upon them. Now, of course, this doesn't describe everybody. You have some people in rural areas who are very conservative and are very quick to get married and try to make that work. But it does seem more in metropolitan areas and more urban areas, the swinger type mentality or promiscuous type mentality is more encouraged, not just in terms of your peers and your friends, but also just in terms of the people you're oftentimes trying to date in general. So the real reason why I wasn't a particular fan of this video was mostly because she spends a lot of the time laying down the foundations and like actually only ever talking about more negative ramifications of so-called hookup culture than she really does bring up a balanced, nuanced point to it. However, her conclusion as to whether hookup culture is or is not healthy is basically this.
Okay, finally to the last question. Is hookup culture unhealthy? Is it overall good or bad? But again, you know how I feel about lack of nuance. I don't think it's possible to say yes or no. It is unhealthy or it's healthy. I think it totally depends on the individual.
Now, of course, our friend here says that, but I'm just gonna play a little montage of her, only ever bringing up the negative ramifications of this. In fact, she has an Instagram where she'll usually ask the people who follow her on Instagram their opinions on a topic before she produces a video on it, and then she'll splice in some of the comments that she read. So these are the comments that she decided to read out, and again, you'll notice they're actually pretty not nice. Let's put it to you like that.
One common thing I heard in the feedback regarding this on Instagram was basically the concept of being considered a prude if you don't participate in hookup culture.
Then why is it that I am a prude, a snob, uptight, or a bore if I make the choice to not stick my tongue down a stranger's throat?
I got a great message from Carolina. She said, hookup culture is toxic and expected from everyone in their 20s. It creates this new pressure that you can't commit to someone early on because you're young and you have so much life to experience. And I think that is a very common kind of perspective. She said, I think people have a really two-dimensional view on this. If you aren't all about it, you're prudish or innocent, or people assume you're religious. In casual sex, you must be religious. So Tilly continues talking about, again, the nuance of this situation, and that because of the kind of sex-positive empowerment angle of hookup culture, there's almost an assumption that to be like a badass free woman, you have to be a little bit more sexually promiscuous, and if you're not, you must somehow be not as much of a feminist, or you're falling for the patriarchy, have a message. I think it's weirdly beaten into young women that we should be having as much sex as possible with as many people as possible, having the kinkiest sex possible. This has caused women like me to put ourselves in situations we didn't want to be in because we thought that's what we should be doing. And again, that could be true for men, women, everybody. I also got a really intriguing message from Jess that said, sometimes I wonder if this empowerment about women having sex, non-committal sex, sometimes I wonder if this empowerment is actually a product of the patriarchy in itself, so men can have more sex with women and then make derogatory remarks covertly. For example, I got a message on Instagram that said, I want hookup culture to be a great thing so desperately, but I only engage in it when I'm manic and or as a means to hurt myself. I want to participate in it as a normal person who enjoys sex, but it always makes me have to confront things I hate or I'm not yet ready to look at on the individual. There definitely are people who truly just love sex and they can hook up, have casual sex without any real negative reactions or effects. But I think for a lot of people, I would bet probably the majority of people, there is some kind of attachment, or maybe their reason for pursuing a casual hookup isn't the healthiest. For example, if you're already feeling low self-esteem or insecurity or loneliness, you may seek that out just to feel something, just to have someone with you for a moment. Again, to feel wanted, to feel sexy. But I can also see how it's confusing after you are intimate with someone. Even if you don't like them, there could still be that element of like, I don't know how I feel about this.
So, it's weird, right? Like, why would she? And this is like her entire video. In fact, I encourage you guys to watch her video in full so you guys know I'm not trying to make this up. It is 24 minutes long, but you guys should still give it a shake so you guys know I'm not cherry picking. This is just the general tone of her video, despite the fact that her conclusions are as there's no nuance and it's all up to the individual. She paints a very clear picture, at least to me, that there aren't very many pros. Well, okay, fine. These are the pros that she decided to lay out.
Feelings about casual sex or hookup culture, a pro for someone else may be a con to you, and vice versa. But generally speaking, casual sex pros: no feelings, explore your sexuality, meet new people, and enjoy the fun of accessible contraceptives.
So, for some reason, not having emotional feelings to someone is a pro. Now, if I'm correct, I do believe she also paints this as a con, so it kind of would at that point depend on the person. Let's see if I'm correct here.
Your feelings, though you don't want to develop them, can develop and you can get hurt.
So it isn't technically no feelings isn't a con, but it's the development of feelings that can be the con, which is a little inverse if you think about it for a second. For some reason, gaining feelings of mutual attraction, or dare I would even say love and care for someone you're being intimate with, is a consequence of your casual sexual encounters, and the positive is not being able or not developing those feelings at all. Now, it's really peculiar just in general that that would even be labeled as a positive. I mean, the type of people who can do this type of behavior oftentimes, at least in my experience, border on being somewhat psychopathic. Like, if you're able to become intimate with lots of people, something good probably didn't happen to you during your developmental stage. In fact, actions as simple as holding hands, hugging people, even kissing people on the cheek literally produces oxytocin that binds you to someone else. Like, literally, just hugging another human being starts a chemical reaction in your brain that starts to bind you to them. If you're able to have sex, which is something that's a hell of a lot more intimate than simply hugging people or touching them or grabbing their hand, and not develop feelings, there's a problem chemically, probably spiritually, and definitely emotionally. Being able to do that should never really be considered a con, and it's strange that people would consider that to be a con, that they're somehow able to become intimate but not care about another human being. Not really even entirely sure as to why someone would be happy to be able to do that, apart from them just being hedonistic, I guess. Like, I guess their sexual pleasure is more important than other people's feelings, but that would ultimately be really selfish, and I don't know very many people that really label being selfish as a good thing. I mean, usually there'd have to be some kind of context, and I don't know if this is the context in which being selfish is good.
Casual sex pros: no feelings, explore your sexuality.
The second thing she labels as being a con is the fact that you can explore your sexuality. But that is a little silly to me, and I would actually imagine that it would be a little more difficult to do so if you're not a sexually attractive person, or i.e. not a woman. What I mean by that is, sure, you can explore your sexuality by not committing to different, well, I mean, technically speaking, you could explore your sexuality with a consistent partner that is open to that kind of stuff, and you guys try and do things out. So being promiscuous doesn't necessarily mean you can do that. You could do it either or. You just need a good partner to do it with, but I digress. But the problem is, exploring your sexuality if your promiscuity is basically being drunk to a point where you forget what happened. You're not exploring anything. In fact, half the time you wouldn't even remember what you did. So obviously that can't be the type of promiscuity we're talking about here. So it'd have to be conscious. And the problem being there is if you're meeting lots of different strangers, you'll never really have the ability to really explore your sexuality because you're always only stuck on that first encounter with them. And like, if you're being so intimate as there where you're trying out different types of stuff like anal sex and like, I don't know, other sexual things, let's not get too graphic here, you could still accomplish all those things with an open and responsible partner. It really doesn't seem like you would need to go through the rigmarole of meeting lots of different people to explore your sexuality.
Meet new people.
The third con is being able to meet new people. But you could meet new people on the internet. You can meet new people playing League of Legends or playing any type of video game, really. You can meet new people at the library. You can meet new people at the supermarket. There are so many other ways you can meet new people that doesn't involve you putting your dicks inside of them or having your vagina envelop their penis. So, I mean, I guess technically that could also be a pro, but it's something that can be accomplished without any of the risk of being promiscuous. So, I guess you could put it on there. But the general trend here oftentimes is the fact that if it isn't outright just kind of bad, as in not having feelings is kind of outright bad no matter how you slice it, the other pros are something that can be accomplished by just doing anything else, or like there are lots of alternatives to being promiscuous.
And enjoy the fun of accessible contraceptives.
The fourth con, which is peculiar, I'm not really sure why she picked this to be a con as much as this is just kind of a necessity of your promiscuity if you're somewhat competent, intelligent, or responsible, and that is there's multiple forms of contraceptives. Again, I'm not entirely sure why that's considered, I said a con, I'm not sure why that's considered a pro. That's kind of weird. That just kind of seems like something that would just be required in order to do this responsibly, not really like you get to have lots of contraceptives. It's just kind of something you would need, you know? Like, in order to get it to the second floor, you get to get on the elevator. It's like, well, I need the elevator, so like something that's required, but you get acting like it's a really positive thing.
Possible cons. Your feelings, though you don't want to develop them, can develop and you can get hurt. You have an increased risk of STIs because if you don't know your partner well, you probably don't know if they've been tested, maybe you don't even ask them. The risk is there.
And of course, she then labels for her cons, the increased risk of sexually transmitted infections, and you could potentially become emotionally involved in someone. Now, it is strange to me that she didn't put in the increased risk of pregnancy by people that are probably terrible parents, but I guess maybe she's hoping that this is all in the individual that is very responsible and is using contraceptives correctly. Maybe that's why she didn't include it, but I would imagine that that's a pretty big freaking con.
On the positive side of hookup culture, it's usually associated with sexual liberation, specifically of women, because with the double standards about sexuality that we have, traditionally men have been praised for being sexually active and having more partners, and women tend to be slut-shamed for it. So in a hookup culture where casual sex and casual encounters are normalized, this can allow women to feel less restricted, feel empowered, liberated, and free to experiment.
Now, one thing that she says that's actually ridiculously peculiar to me is the sexual empowerment of women. Now, lots of ladies love to say that men are praised for having lots of sex. Of course, these dumbasses seem to always neglect that men are often filled with derision and insulted for not having sex, but that doesn't help. Whereas women are insulted and disrespected for being promiscuous. And of course, on the first surface, that is true. The only thing that a lot of women don't recognize is, one, the only men that really care about the sexual exploits of other men are close peer groups. Strangers really don't give a fuck. And two, the reason why men are not particularly fond of their partner having lots of sex is because we can recognize the writing on the wall. And the writing on the wall is pretty simple. Most people that are promiscuous are not happy individuals. Now, someone in the comment section may be able to write down, I have had sex with well over 137 people and I am totally fine and happy and I love my life. Maybe you do. Maybe you're the super special person that is able to have sex with 147 people and not care about them. Cool. The only thing is, you're one person, and even if it was 1,000, we know that 1,000,000 people who are promiscuous are not happy people. They're not happy. Lots of people that get to a point where they become promiscuous are oftentimes depressed. They're oftentimes using sex to mask lots of different insecurities, especially young women are doing this. And young men are also doing this as well. The alpha male Chad bro type character that everyone aspires, I guess you could say, to be like, is the same character. Now, of course, he's got to be a little bit more involved in this, whereas women kind of just got to show up. And for women, it's a little bit more hollow. I mean, for more reasons than one. So you guys catch that innuendo. But the point now that I'm making is that people are still using promiscuity in the same way, both men and women. Men, the alpha Chad male bro type bullshit, as a way to seek manhood and masculinity in the eyes of his peers. Women, in order to cover up and mask the insecurities that they have, whether they feel like they're useless or whether they like the pleasure of being sex in order to mask their depression at that period in time. That's what a lot of people are using this type of behavior for. And I find it very interesting that this isn't really highlighted in her video, that most of the time mentally depressed people or mentally pained people are using promiscuity as a way to cover up that pain, rather than these people are actually fixing the problems of their insecurity.
A little bit of an addendum here. It's not that she didn't mention this at all. What I mean when I say she didn't really highlight it was she didn't really go into depth or detail about it. Towards the end, she does mention that this can be the case for young men and for young women, but like I said, it exists at the end, not really in the main bulk of her video.
Of course, I kind of went off on a little bit of a tangent here. Let's be a little more philosophical at this point. Somehow having sex for women is empowering because society or the patriarchy or whatever says that women have to be virginal. Now, I've said this in numerous videos of mine, and I'm not very popular, so I'm just going to have to constantly repeat this. But the reason why chastity is a virtue for women is very simple. That's because getting sex for a lady is easy. Rejecting it is the challenge. Picking someone who is good and virtuous is where chastity becomes a virtue for a young woman. It's not hard for even the ugliest or worst looking woman. And this goes without saying, but attractive women certainly don't have a challenge in literally putting out any type of ad or walking down the street and having guys try to have sex with them. There's no virtue and there's no empowerment in doing the easiest thing possible as a woman, and that's showing up. I don't even understand how you could drink the Kool-Aid and be deceived to such a degree as a young lady as to think that somehow you are empowered by doing the bare minimum, by just showing up. The challenge is not, and the reason why men are oftentimes praised, and even then, most strangers really don't give a damn about the sexual exploits of men that aren't close to them, but the reason why men are praised for their ability to have lots of sex is because it is challenging for us. Even if having sex itself isn't really much of a challenge for some young men, finding close and intimate relationships with women is oftentimes considered a milestone in our lives and our development. And when that be the case, when obtaining a woman in and of itself is the challenge, the reason why men are oftentimes praised for being able to do that is because there's more difficulty and there's a lot more involved than women just showing up. In other words, if you like hookup culture, or if you're a woman and you enjoy being promiscuous because it empowers you, I just want to say you've been sold a lie, and it does nothing to empower you. It just kind of confirms that you have a vagina. You're not really special because you can be promiscuous as a woman. Sorry, I guess.
Charlie made a really great point. She said it's intimacy on demand. So hookup culture allows you to essentially kind of have the best of both worlds in terms of being able to have an intimate moment or a night with someone, but again, without the strings or the complexity of a full relationship. I also think there may be an element of maybe it being easier to find someone to hook up with rather than find someone who wants to date you, that you want to date also.
Now, of course, on the surface, that sounds reasonable. And it actually reminds me of probably one of my favorite moments in the Vampire Diaries. Don't worry, that clip's coming up, guys. But I understand how... I don't think she really understands what this is really saying, and I don't think the woman that said this to her is really recognizing how painful that sounds. You say it's intimacy on demand. It's a form of pseudo-intimacy. It's a way to feel temporarily what it would be like to have someone close to you and someone committed to you for a time, but it always goes away. It's never there forever or consistently or for a long period of time. It's basically covering in the hole only for that hole to eventually evaporate, or the filling to eventually evaporate and just leave that hole there. And like I said, my favorite clip in the Vampire Diaries is actually a really good showcase of this, and really explains what's going on with a lot of these people.
Loneliness, Stefan. That's why you and I memorialize our dead. There's the briefest of moments before we kill where we literally hold their life in our hands. And then we rip it away. And we're left with nothing. So gathering other people's letters or writing their names on a wall is a reminder that in the end we're left infinitely and utterly alone.
Now, granted, I completely understand that Klaus is a vampire and Stefan's a vampire and they're killing people, but for this analogy to work, let's be reasonable here. Killing people is their form of intimacy, because they're vampires. That's what they do. They gotta drink people's blood in order to survive. But the main point, the main idea, if you paid attention in English class, which I hope you did, if you understand the main idea, let's not sweat the details here, guys, is that intimacy is formed, or they feel this form of pseudo-intimacy and closeness with people in these high stress type of situations, or in these highly emotional type of situations. Sex, for a lot of human beings, is the same thing as Stefan and Klaus killing people as vampires. It's highly emotional. In that moment, you are close with this person, and then you rip it away, and it's gone, and you're left with nothing. And you have to constantly look for that high again and again and again. And in that way, it actually kind of becomes something like a drug, which I don't think a lot of people really recognize is a deeply painful thing for a lot of these people that are participating in this type of promiscuity.
I also got a really intriguing message from Jess that said, sometimes I wonder if this empowerment about women having sex, non-committal sex, sometimes I wonder if this empowerment is actually a product of the patriarchy in itself, so men can have more sex with women and then make derogatory remarks covertly.
And I, of course, think it's hilarious that feminism is so preoccupied on this man versus woman type of ideology that it ends up Ouroborosing itself on its tail, with this young lady saying, hey, wait a minute, hold on, ladies. If we end up having more sex with men, aren't we just giving them exactly what they wanted in the first place, and thus we're not actually being empowered, but we're actually manipulated into thinking that we were actually doing something of our own accord? I mean, I just think that it's funny that I've never heard any other woman finally recognize that shit. That it does only seem like a select few males are actually being able to have increased sexuality or increased sex, and the vast majority of men aren't really able to be able to do that. And the men that are able to get into relationships oftentimes are not able to get into strong, tight, committed ones. And the same thing would go for young ladies as well. There's oftentimes more dysfunction in relationships than we find successful ones. So to be clear, I'm not saying that there aren't any successful relationships at all. That would be fucking dumb. But it does seem like the general trend for a lot of people are unsuccessful relationships. And the general trend for a lot more people is this flaky, ghosty type nonsense and this hookup type nonsense that a lot of people who are between their 20s and 30s are more experiencing more often. So I think I'm going to end the video here because I really covered up a lot of things that I kind of wanted to highlight in her video. I don't think her video is terrible, but I also don't think that it's very forthright. This young lady very clearly does not think that hookup culture is healthy, despite the fact that she wants to say that there's some nuance here. She mostly paints the picture that there are a lot more negatives than positives to this stuff. And anything that is a positive that you can find in this so-called hookup culture are all things that you could obtain by just being monogamous. Or you can if honestly it's a pro to meet new people, you can just do that anywhere. You can do that at Subway if you really just want to meet new people. You can do that at a game shop. You can do that in a library. You can do that in Books A Million. You can do that anywhere and everywhere. having to have sex with these people to meet new people is kind of silly and just looks like you're grasping at straws. Saying that no feelings is somehow a pro to being able to be promiscuous is oftentimes an indication of someone's emotional pain or psychopathy. Normal human beings, again, bond by literally just holding hands, hugging people, and cuddling. Sex being the ultimate connection with someone, I mean, you're literally being inside of them or you're letting someone be inside of you, not creating an emotional bond, is kind of terrifying, and it really speaks volumes to something that could have happened to these people. A lot of people who are abused sexually become individuals who use sex in that manner, and that is not a very good thing at all. That is, you could hardly ever say that that is a pro. So, I'm going to end the video here. In the next video, I'm going to talk about sex positivity. Why I think it's a little bit of a, say, misnomer. Might be the best word to use here. But that being said, I certainly hope you guys got something out of today's video. And if you did, man, go and click the like button. If you go and click that, subscribe button. Comment in the comments below. And as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.